Welcome back. We're just starting again. This is the, what did we say it was called? Prick Your Bubble.
Pricking the Bubble.
Pricking the Bubble.
I think that's the name we decided on, Lama.
I think so. Pricking the Bubble. Yes.
Now, how did we go with episode 1 on this?
Oh, I think we went fantastically.
Right. So do you want to explain to the listeners where the name comes from?
Did you say listeners?
Yeah.
Not singular.
Do you want to explain to the listener?
That's right. Hello, Mum. What am I explaining? Oh, yes. Well, part of what we're doing with this podcast is just a couple of guys having a bit of a chat about, things that are going on in the world.
Yeah, pretty smart guys too. Let's put it out.
Well, there's no one smarter than me. That's what I always say. Just to have a look at some topics that are, that bother us a little bit, I'd say.
Damn those topics.
That's right. And just trying to discuss them in a more logical, rational way. Maybe remove some of the emotion from it. Is that
potentially remove some of the emotion, add some more emotion,
add some unrelated emotion.
Unrelated emotion.
So it's like an addiction. You don't get rid of one; you replace an addiction.
But we're going to discuss just a lot of things, just stuff. Yeah, we're going to.
That's what we should have called it. Discussing a lot of things. That would have been much better.
But pricking the bubble, I guess, what are we saying? That really comes from because we feel that a lot of people just live in their own bubble. And,
I certainly do, and I'm sure you do too.
Well, I probably occupy several bubbles.
That's right. Yes. No, I'm certainly in a bubble. I am very happy to admit that I'm in a lefty bubble who's probably sad from recent election results and all that sort of stuff.
Points.
But it's.
I just thought I'd like to say that I once knew a lady whose name was Bubbles, but look, we won't go into that one. But anyway,
very good.
Yes,
thank you.
So you're in a lefty bubble.
I'm in a bit of a lefty bubble. Right. I'm filled with people who are.
Am I on the right, the alt right?
No, I don't think you're on the alt right. To be honest, I think you're in the centre right. I would say.
Yeah, okay.
Because you're sensible.
I am,
but you have some views that lean the other way to me, and that's fine.
And you and I have argued on a lot of things, and certainly I don't think we've argued as much with the recent election, though. I don't think.
No, we've both sort of gone. Oh.
Yeah, we have. So I think I don't know if we've got a topic on the table at the moment, but
there's 10, right?
Yeah, but let's. I think we need to explain to our listeners with this episode what happened in the recent election here in Australia.
Well, that's true. But by the time we upload this somewhere, yes, maybe the election will be long forgotten. But it certainly was one of those elections where the left side of the political parties, I guess.
Yeah, the left being Labor for those who often don't know what the left means. Yep.
Which is a lot of the people voting in the last election as well. They were predicted to win, and they were predicted to win reasonably well.
Oh, I would say, I would tell you and have to say that Labor was predicted to basically landslide this election.
But it did come back towards the thing they were saying, won't be quite as romping it in as we thought, but they still anyway they lost.
Yeah,
and the right side, so the people who were in government. That's the Liberal Party. That's with a big L rather than the little L.
Yeah.
The conservative side of politics won. And we say won, but they didn't actually change. Like the number of seats that each main party has pretty much stayed the same.
Yeah, I would like to say they did win the election. I mean, officially they won the election.
Well, officially they won. Yeah.
But I don't really think they won. I mean, for me, when you win something, especially like an election, it's more than a 50% vote. You should be... it's not about getting 50% and then declaring a win. So they more or less got just over 50%.
Well, that's due to our preferential voting system. the Labor Party had 32%, I think it was, of
Yes.
the primary vote, and the
Yes.
Liberals had, I don't know, they probably all had the same. So no one actually wins.
Yes.
They form coalitions, and then because of the preferential voting system, whoever you voted for second, if it wasn't one of the main parties you voted for first, your second preference then gets allocated to, or third or fourth or fifth, whatever it is, preference gets allocated to one of the main two parties. And that's why they can say, well, they won it with 52% of the vote. Well, they didn't really. They won it with 30-something percent of the vote.
Yeah.
But, preferences went
Look,
their way.
I have to say, I went into that election booth, and I'm not going to mention who I voted for. I went into the election booth, and my immediate reaction was, I don't know who the fuck to vote for. That was honestly my reaction. I don't like any of them. I firmly believe they're all a bunch of criminals.
Allegedly.
And allegedly.
Sorry.
And I don't mean that. I don't mean to use that word in its truest sense, in that they stole money or they did something which was against the law. That's not what I really mean. I use the word because it has a certain connotation. I think they are criminal in the way they act toward people who are not of their ilk. They demean people. I think they demean their position, especially. And I'm talking about all of them. I'm not talking about any one particular party.
I certainly noticed that. I'm on Twitter a fair bit, and I certainly noticed that with the people in my bubble, my left bubble.
Yes.
There are those who are like, oh, we lost. What are we going to do? Okay, let's work hard. And then there's it's all everyone else's fault. You guys suck. You did the wrong thing. You voted. And I don't go for that. I mean, some of them probably do suck, but.
So I'm on Twitter a lot as well, as you know, Lama. And
this is Dr. Brant Raven, just as a reminder.
Yeah, you didn't introduce me at the start of this, Dr. Brant Raven.
I figured this was your preamble.
Well, yeah.
We wanted to work away.
Yeah, it looks like this has sort of become the de facto topic for this podcast. Yes. But yeah, I'm on Twitter a lot, and what I did notice was the Labor supporters. I noticed having a go at everyone else for voting incorrectly.
Yeah.
And I thought about that, and I thought, well, how does one vote incorrectly? How and I made a few comments to a few people saying,
how did that go down?
Well, a lot of them didn't respond, and those that did respond did so irrationally. And what I found my only comment to them was to say, well, isn't it wonderful that we live in a democracy as long as it goes your way?
Yeah, and that is actually the problem I have with the people who are, I've got 800 and something, it's not that many, don't get excited everyone, 800 and something people following me, or maybe I'm following them, I can't remember, one way or the other, but they all are from that one side.
Right.
And so I don't really get a balanced view necessarily of what's going on out there.
Uh-huh.
And if you combine that with the fact that there was a recent thing that came out that said that only 19% of Australians are Twitter users, you're getting a very selective view on things.
Very, very thin.
And so when I read these things and people are saying, it's outrageous, this has happened, and I think, oh, wow, that's really terrible. That's a very small percentage of people who actually think that.
It is.
But they also have loud voices.
It is. Well, yeah, I mean, they do. They do. But look, as I say, I sat there at the election booth and I really didn't feel that I could vote for anyone because I just didn't like anyone. And I didn't particularly like the policies of any of the parties. I really didn't like the Labor policies, and I've said this several times. I know you may not agree, but I really feel Labor plays the politics of envy. I really feel that quite strongly. They tend to play the card, well, you've got more than us, and we want some of that. And I'm like, well, no, you can't have that because I've worked hard for what I've got. So why does that suddenly give you the right to take something that I've worked hard for? And I'm talking about money. I'm talking about possessions that I might leave in an inheritance.
I think you're mostly talking about money though, and that's the fundamental difference. Is that
money does drive everything. I mean, it does. You can't do things without money. You can't. You can do things, but if
money
you want,
helps.
if you want to do things at a certain level, you have to have that money, and that's just a reality.
Look, I was just going to say part of the. I mean, it was set up, whether they meant it or not, as a debate, I guess, between the two sides on money and financial issues.
Yes.
And the main one that was in the news, even though when I went around talking to people, no one said it, was that whole franking credits issue.
Yes.
And the franking credits, just for anyone who doesn't know what it was, it's about the dividend you get from owning shares, and whether you're entitled to get the tax element of that back as a return if you, as a retiree, haven't paid the tax in the first place. And my argument is, well, no, you're not entitled to get that. Why would you be entitled to get that back? However, the way it was presented in the media, or the way it was presented by the other team, the other side of politics, was that it was a tax on retirees. And that worked. And it comes down to, in the end, not how well the policy will work for people, it's how well you sell it to people. And if you can't sell your policy terribly well and the other side latches onto that and says, this is a shit-ass policy, they're trying to take your money, that's going to work. And it did work.
Yep.
So I think, at the very heart of the actual issue itself was these people are being given money that they haven't paid tax on, so they don't need to be given this money. How could anyone argue against that as just an actual policy itself?
Yep.
And yet they did.
Yep. That's actually a very good way of putting it. That's actually a very good way of putting it. Now, and again, when I think about it carefully, you're absolutely right. If I look at what's good for the country and what's good for the economy, you're absolutely right. These people shouldn't be receiving that extra money. They should not be receiving that advantage. But the way they should have sold it, or the way they should have done it, is they should have grandfathered it. They should have said, right.
Yeah, but most people don't know what that means either.
Well,
you've got to sell it to people they don't understand anything at all.
Well, you absolutely have to sell it, but they should. But I think this would have been a much easier sell if they'd said, right, you're a retiree, you've done your planning around receiving this franking credit. That's fine. We're going to leave you the way it is. Any new distribution, any new share purchase, any new thing, no, you're not going to receive the franking credit. That's it.
That would have been much easier sell.
Game over. Now, why on earth wouldn't you do it? Why on earth would you not do it that way?
Well, I'll tell you the reason they wouldn't do it that way is because they wanted that $6 billion now.
Yeah.
As opposed to waiting over time for these retirees to drop off and die and just, it's the equivalent of saying, well, we're going to retrench people, but it'll come through natural attrition where people will just go away and retire and all. So that's what they should have done.
Yes.
But $6 billion is an awful lot of money to say, no, don't worry about it.
Yes.
So they said, well, no, we are going to worry about it. We'd quite like it because we're going to use that $6 billion to fund something else. But you've lost them already at that point. Because
what would they have funded? They would have funded
schools and hospitals.
Oh, give me a break.
Well, that's the claim. That's what they say.
Schools and hospitals. Literally, there are 2, maybe 3 government schools that are half decent in this state. Maybe 21 if I multiply by 7, and I'm being fucking generous. 21 in the whole country that are decent schools that are government based that I could be happy to send my kid to. Seriously. In a first world country,
a bit of a downgrade there.
Bit of a Freudian slip there. In a first world country, I don't think that's really a good position to be.
Well, maybe that's what they wanted the money for, to help build these other schools.
Yeah, but they wouldn't have. They would have wasted the money.
Well,
they would have wasted the money. They would have stuck it into welfare. They would have given someone else a flat screen TV, and a Nintendo Switch, and again a topic that we can talk about.
And I would have loved it.
Yeah, well, no, look, I'm not necessarily pleased that the Libs won, but I'm not necessarily pleased that Labor lost. Right? Notice the way I've put that. I'm not
confusingly. Was it?
Again, I'm not necessarily pleased that the Libs won. I don't think that was necessarily the best thing for the country.
You were coming from the Alien versus Predator side of things. Remember the catchphrase for that movie was Alien versus Predator. Whoever wins, we lose.
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And
so Predator won, and I was going for Alien, but
like I said, sitting in the polling booth as I was,
you were sitting
standing in
no
the
wonder
polling
you
booth.
had trouble. You were sitting.
Yeah.
Wasn't really a
Hang on
polling
a
booth.
second, that wasn't a polling booth. That was the toilet. No, same thing, really.
Vote one. No, I won't say that. Go on.
But sitting in the being in the polling booth as I was, I really found it difficult to make a decision. Even though I had listened to a lot of the arguments and had a fair understanding of what the policies were, I really didn't feel like we were going to win anything.
So what would politicians have to do to win you over? Because I know, I mean, you're on, what's the word? You're in touch with what's going on. So you're aware
I'm reasonably in touch, yeah.
So what would have to happen for you to suddenly say, actually, I do think that this person or this group have our interests, at the front of what they're planning and all that sort of business?
It's a very tough question to answer.
Okay.
I'm very much a cynic, as you well know.
I never knew that.
Right.
Okay.
I'm very much a cynic. So I would have to say I don't think that there are any things that they could do to actually win me over. I think there would have to be a fundamental shift in the process. I mean, there really would have to be a fundamental shift in the process.
But you don't see that happening?
No, I don't. I'm talking about the sort of shift that whereby, if a politician makes a promise and then doesn't keep that promise, and there's no new data, right? So doesn't keep the promise, there's no new data, that they would basically cop a jail sentence. That's the sort of shift
you will never get anyone going into politics. It's like
right, and that's the sort of fundamental shift I'm talking about. And I agree. If you put those situations in place, you're probably not going to get anyone going into politics. Take for example, my favourite politician, Julia Gillard. Okay, now she went into politics and she was elected on a platform that there will be no carbon tax
under the government
she leads.
Yep.
Right now, when she was then elected, and that was one of the basic promises she made, she changed her mind. Now, I would argue, and she did try to introduce a carbon payment scheme, which was effectively a tax, a rose by any other name. So it was effectively a tax. And I would say to you, between the point at which she made the promise and then she was elected, there wasn't a new data.
Well, there was new data. The new data was that she didn't get enough votes on her own to get elected. She needed to get the support of another party.
Okay.
And so, therefore, there's the new data.
Yeah, but fine. New political data, but I'm saying there was no new data about climate change. It's not like she fundamentally believed that there was no climate change and made one promise.
I'm never going to introduce. Yeah.
Right, and then won the election and.
What's that? It's climate change.
And saw some new overwhelming report that was new data from the Arctic that basically said, and the Antarctic that basically said, wow, look at this, climate change is really real, and now she made a new decision. That would be a valid thing to do if you had new data. Oh, well, look at this. I read this report and suddenly I'm completely convinced that there is climate change.
So what was her option?
Well, I don't know.
But she has to make a decision.
It's interesting. That's actually a really good question, Lama. What was her option? Well, her option was honesty. Her option was to say, you know what?
There is going to be a carbon tax.
I'm actually going to introduce a carbon tax. I made a decision, and now I realise that I can't run a government without bringing in these other people, the Greens, and I have to make a promise to them to bring them in.
I agree that would have been the best thing for her to do, rather than to say, redefine what a carbon tax was.
Exactly.
No,
rather than going around and trying to say, no, that's not what I meant to say, that's not what I meant to do. no, everyone knew I meant to introduce it. Rather than going around and doing that, her best option would have been to say, you know what, I'm going to bone this up and say, I said one thing, I now am saying another. This is the only way we can move forward as a government, and there it is. Now,
that was a condition, though. That was a condition for the other team to support her, because remember, it was the independents who had to. This is back. Which election was this? 2010.
Oh, something like that. Yeah,
Four
prime ministers ago. Or something.
That's right. It was the condition of her forming that government, or even for Tony Abbott to form a government, that you needed to support some sort of action on climate change.
Right.
And she was the one who said, "Yep, all right, I'll do it," because Tony Abbott still doesn't believe in climate change.
Right.
So he was never going to agree to it. What was the thing? I can't remember the exact phrase, but he was never going to agree to it. So they only had to.
He really doesn't believe in.
Of course, he doesn't believe in.
You really think that he doesn't think it's happening?
Yeah, correct. That's what I believe he thinks, and he's given me no evidence or no obvious response to anything that's ever been said in the last X number of years to suggest that he does believe it.
Okay. Okay, but anyway, going back on topic, I understand that she needed to make that sort of promise in order to bring whatever party on board, and in order for her to form a leadable government. I understand this, but her mistake wasn't necessarily changing her mind. Her mistake was changing her mind, how she did that, and then going back and trying to redefine the situation.
But that works for Trump. Think of Trump. He quite often says, "I didn't say that," and then someone says, "Here is a video of you saying that." Oh, there's fake news. Yeah. That was my worst Trump impression ever. It sounded more like Julia Gillard than Trump. How do they... what are you going to do?
Why does it work for him?
Well, it works for him because who's going to rein him in? You can't prosecute... No, I know we changed it up. You can't prosecute a sitting president. That's the way it goes. So what's he got to lose?
Yeah, well, you're right.
He has nothing to lose at all.
And you've got to look at it. America is a very different beast to most other democracies in the world. I'm not going to say anything bad about America and its democracy.
It's different.
It's different. It's an interesting one, and I hope we have some US-based listeners that will take an interest in this podcast and
expand.
It could expand in maybe some comments or whatever, and maybe even expand and give us a topic that we can talk about. But look, America is a very different beast in terms of its democracy. Its amendments to the Constitution. One of its primary amendment, which is free speech. Or is that an amendment, or is that part of the actual Constitution?
I don't know.
Yeah,
I would have to look that up.
Yeah, well.
The right to free speech.
The right to free speech, which, by the way, we don't have enshrined in our laws. If you look at those rights,
that will indeed be a topic for a future episode.
So we don't have those rights. We are unlike the US. They're not enshrined in our laws and in our. I don't want to call it a constitution, but do we have a constitution? Or
we do, but it's not one of those. Yeah. We don't hold it up and say, "Here's the constitution." No, no one does that. It's Australia. We're laid back. Yeah, it's probably in the drawer somewhere.
Yeah.
It's no one worries too much.
So so there's a lot there that you could unpack and make into multiple episodes. But that's what I would have said. Yes, it does work for Trump. I don't fully understand why it works for Trump. I don't really want to say anything good or bad about Trump. I don't live in that country, so it would be really wrong for me to play politics in someone else's backyard.
Not on this podcast.
Not on this one. But in our backyard, again, I honestly didn't feel anything bad about Julia Gillard and her government. I didn't like a lot of her policies, but I just found her to be completely dishonest.
I just think on that one thing, look, the problem, we'll move on from Julia Gillard in a sec. The problem I had was not just that part, was she didn't go forward with the same-sex marriage thing. And she said, well, no, I don't accept it. And then immediately after losing office, became a supporter. And so the Labor Party then became a big supporter of it. And the problem I have with that is that's too much power for the leader to be calling the shots when it should be. I think everyone you vote for, you like to think that they have an input. And I know that whoever's at the top has more of an input, but they shouldn't be able to just dismiss something that the rest of the people
Yep.
in that party
Yeah, what was the
support.
story there? Why didn't she support the same-sex
Well, I
marriage?
think she did, but I think she was beholden to some other faction or group.
Right.
And I think it was more of a case of, all right, well, I won't rock that boat if you don't rock this boat. Or,
Right.
you know,
Well, now
fight the battles that
I
you can.
actually didn't know that, and now I dislike her even more.
Well, I like her, but I don't like the fact that she was not being
Oh, well, I dislike
completely
her.
honest with how she
Well,
felt about the
I
situation.
can't. I mean, if she supported same-sex marriage, but was publicly not supporting it simply to maintain a factional position,
Well,
I understand why she needs to do that. But
that's
still
the
don't-
way politics works, which is
Well,
part of the problem.
and I choose not to like that.
Okay.
I choose not to like that, and I choose not to like her as a person for doing that. And maybe that's why I'm not in politics, because I couldn't do that.
Yeah,
I'd have to be beholden to what I truly believe.
yeah, and I think that's part of the problem is that there are, people are towing certain lines or following what they've been. Yeah, but that's how some people get elected.
Yep.
By oh, I promise I'll do this for.
What happens when someone comes in and says, you know what, I'll let you stay in government, but you've got to gas all the Jews?
Yeah, well, that's right.
What happens when that happens?
What was the name of that law that when you mentioned something about Hitler, that's the end of the argument? What was
Well, no, but it's a completely valid thing. That's what I'm saying. It's a slippery slope when you start removing your own humanity just simply to remain in power. Then it becomes a slippery slope. Maybe you don't deserve to be in power if you need to do that.
And so my question comes back to the current election that by current I mean the last one,
Right.
that we just had.
Right.
How do we deal with the dishonesty in the? Again, I'm probably coming from my lefty bubble side of things.
Right.
How do we counter or how do we eliminate the fact that people can manipulate in a way or influence the election by spouting out untruths? So again, back to that tax thing that I was talking about for the what was it called again? The retirees
Retiree tax.
but again, it wasn't a retiree tax. If you're taking away a gift, that's not a tax. And so, but it was presented as a tax, and it was the same as.
But hang on, if
there
you're
was
taking it, but you are taking it away.
No,
I
you're
mean,
not.
you are. I mean,
No, you're eliminating a gift.
Yeah, but if I'm benefiting from that gift,
That's what you do with it. Is that if I come to you, if I come to your house every day and give you a bottle of milk and you don't pay for it, and then I suddenly stop doing that, that's not a milk tax on you. I've just stopped giving you a gift, and that's exactly what this thing was.
yeah, okay.
Anyway,
okay,
but
the argument can be made. Yeah, go on.
But that's entirely the whole point. That was presented, let's just say, as a milk tax. That was presented as a tax on retirees. And old people, no offence to any old people listening, that's what they heard. They were like, a tax. I don't want a tax. And the way that the election was swayed, I would say, or influenced was by scaring people into thinking that they were being taxed here or that their jobs were going to be taken away here. None of it actually was going to be the case. Now, again, I'm coming from my left side of things. That's fine.
Right, so
but
you're saying the other side basically told a whole bunch of untruths or misrepresented a position so that, and effectively led them to winning the election.
In as much as the same way that sex sells in advertising, scaring people also works.
Yeah.
And I just wonder at what point we realise that and think that it's actually a bad thing to be doing. So should we have some standards put into play?
Who decides?
That's exactly the people who were saying it.
It's very difficult in this position to decide what is an untruth and what is not an untruth. I mean, there are a number of facts you can talk about. You can talk about things that are factual. Mm-hmm. If I've got three objects, by all definitions, I've got three objects. Mm. That is a fact-based position. But when you come to politics, it's not quite religion where I'm asked to believe something that cannot be proven. I'm asked to believe something based on a series of perceptions or based on a representation that could be argued correctly. I mean, you're saying it's not a tax, but in the right context, it could probably be argued that it is a tax. Now, I'm not going to take a side either way, but I think that's the point. The point is it could be argued. There is no fact So therefore, you can never go back to your coalition and say you're lying.
Well, and that's right. And they've removed, even in Parliament, you're not allowed to say, "Oh, the other person's lying." You have to withdraw that, and you just have to say, you're being a bit fancy with the facts or whatever it is. But you can say what you like on the election campaign. You can say, how long did it go for? 5 weeks, I think it was. We had a 5-week election campaign, and I think the decision was probably made early on to. Is it Morrison, the government, the Prime Minister, used to be in advertising.
Yes.
And I think he probably used that knowledge or that skill you ever watch Gruen?
Yes.
So there's a TV show on the ABC here, Gruen Nation or whatever it's called, and it's about how easily we can be influenced or how advertising works on people, all that sort of business. And I think... a lot of that was put into play.
Oh, look, it absolutely was.
But that's clever. But the problem I have is there's two things. Well, should we be allowed to do the lying thing? But the other thing is, why is my side not as good at it? So it's like, well, I don't like it, but maybe my side should actually get a bit better at doing it.
Well, again, it depends on what you want to classify as lying. Look, Labor didn't sell their policies very well at all, and I think there was maybe a little bit of smugness there. I think
they thought they had it in the bag.
Yeah. Everyone thought Sportsbet, the sports betting agency,
they paid out, didn't they?
Which paid out people. So for those that may not know, there's a sports betting agency. I think was it Ladbrokes or something?
Oh, I'm not sure which one it
was. It was one of these online sports betting agencies.
Gamble responsibly.
Yeah, and people bet heavily on Labor winning the election. And prior to the actual election, this sports betting agency, a obviously run by a bunch of geniuses, decided to pay out before the result was even known. That's how...
What happens with that? Did they have... That's
no,
it, isn't it? It's bad luck. The money's gone.
They lost the money.
Wow.
And then, of course, Labor didn't win, so the people that were paid out...
How good would it be if you had been paid out on a Labor win and just before the election, because Liberal were at like $18 or something, or $8 or something.
Yes.
You then reinvested that winning for a Liberal win. Oh, there you go. How good would that be?
But again, it's understandable. It's obviously the reason they paid out early is a piece of advertising itself, right? They did so because it's novel to do that.
Well,
and this is an advertising ploy on their behalf. Again, we can talk about this in another topic. But again, they lost a whole bunch of money, and because everyone thought that the Labor government was absolutely going to romp it in the bag.
And the part that I just want to cover on this is why did they think that?
Well, I think one of the major reasons they thought that was because there were no people in the Liberal government that anyone actually liked.
That's right.
No one liked anyone in the government that got elected, and they still potentially don't like anyone.
Well, yeah.
Right. And there was also the fact that Scott Morrison, the current Prime Minister,
what date is it? Yes, he's still the Prime Minister.
Effectively stabbed in the back the sitting Prime Minister.
It was like the human centipede of backstabbings.
Yes.
Just
a terrible movie. But Scott Morrison basically usurped Malcolm Turnbull, who was the sitting Prime Minister at the time,
who previously stabbed Tony
Abbott. And that whole cycle of backstabbing, there was this, and of course Labor did it, of course.
Yeah, there's lots of stabbing. In fact, they stabbed each other in the front in Labor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so all of this that happened,
well, hold on.
A lot of people didn't like the fact that Scott Morrison, or ScoMo, if you want to use the vernacular, that he did this. They didn't like him for that reason, and it was from that point on, the point at which he usurped Malcolm Turnbull, that people basically said, "Oh, well, Labor have got it in the bag. Labor are going to win the next election." But I thought that.
Well, it wasn't just that though. This was the part I was actually getting at: is the opinion polls.
Oh yes.
Had Labor losing? No, it didn't. Had Labor winning?
Yes.
But they had also won the previous 3 years
Yes.
worth of opinion polls. So
Yes.
they hadn't lost one, not one.
Yes.
So sometimes they came a bit close, sometimes went the other way. They hadn't lost one.
Yes.
And then we get to the election and they lose.
Yes.
And the election, and the polls are like, yeah, okay, well, we got that one wrong. But why would you? The first thing I did after the election was immediately unfollow every polling agency or person who represented the polls on Twitter.
Yes.
Because clearly they're completely useless. What is the point?
Yes.
There is 0 point in following any of those polls.
I agree.
So why do people do it?
Well, people do it.
Yeah, but why? What is it?
I really don't know. And again, I wasn't really following the polls, but you sort of have to hear them. You do hear them all the time. And yeah, Labor was romping in the polls.
Well, I followed them, and it gave me my, I got my jollies thinking, hey, they've won another one. Yeah, we got it in the bag.
It's in the bag.
Shit,
yeah.
It's not in the bag.
And I remember sitting there on Saturday when the results are getting counted, and I'm thinking,
where's his phone number so I can ring you up and go, blah, blah, blah.
And I just sat there and I thought to myself, wow, look at this. What's happening here? I can't believe this. I can't believe these numbers. I had to do quite a double take and a triple take, but because I just couldn't believe them. I couldn't believe that Liberals were actually likely to win. And there was a lot of uncertainty at times. There was some uncertainty. And yeah, I don't necessarily think the best party won.
But a party won.
So yeah. Look, this wasn't even our topic for this podcast. Well,
we were going to be talking about garden salad. No, we weren't. I have no idea what we were going to be talking about. But...
Yeah, well, it's funny you should speak about garden salads.
No, it's not.
Well, it is because, as you probably do know, a bit of trivia for those that don't know, the motto of the United States was originated from a garden salad.
Do tell.
Well, the motto of the United States was, united as one, or I don't know what it is in Latin. Let me.
I know what this particular segment is in Latin. Caveat emptor.
Thank you for that. But no, the motto of the US. Again, it's united as one. And I'm just looking it up.
I feel like we should have some thinking music, but I won't sing.
Well,
you should thank me for that, by the way.
Well, that's it. E pluribus unum, which was
about a quarter to three.
That was the motto of the United States.
Right.
In before 1960. After 1960, it became
everyone for themselves.
Yeah, essentially, essentially, it became "In God We Trust."
Right.
And well, that actually, I shouldn't say 1960. It actually happened in 1956, approximately 1960. But yeah, and why?
I was born in approximately 1980.
Right.
1974,
but E pluribus unum was what it was originally, and the reason I say it was garden salad and why it's related to garden salad.
I'm intrigued as to how this is going to match up.
Originally, the idea of E pluribus unum was used by the poet Virgil in describing the
singing Thunderbirds.
Different Virgil.
All right. Okay.
It was used to describe salad dressing.
Ah.
Yeah. So it was used to describe salad.
I will head to the supermarket after this and ask for my, what was it again?
And the original use of E pluribus unum was out of many become one when he was describing the mixing of oil and vinegar and herbs and salt. Out of many become one. So originally, E pluribus unum was used to describe salad dressing, and up until 1956 was the motto of the United States. So there's a bit of
there you go. You've wrapped up this podcast quite nicely.
There's a bit of an aside.
We've come not only not come full circle, we've barely stepped into the first little hemisphere of
We've
anything.
turned it into a square.
We have.
All
Very
right.
good.
So if we're at the end of this, maybe,
I think we are.
right. Maybe you should mention a potential topic for our next one.
Well, not garden salads. I made that up, but it was interesting how he managed to link it in nonetheless, don't you think? Dr. Raven, expert on many a topic.
Many a topic.
Well, no, we've got a couple of topics coming up that I think will be good. I quite like, is religion relevant? That's a good one.
That is a good one.
That's quite interesting. A couple of things that we have discussed in the past about UFOs.
UFOs?
What do we think about UFOs? Might seem a bit out there, but we'll make it relevant.
I'll take that.
Yeah. Gender remakes.
Gender remakes. Oh,
Ghostbusters, Ocean's 8, female Doctor Who. I'm interested in your.
Oh,
I'm
female
interested
Doctor Who.
Interested in what you think about that.
Interesting.
Anyway,
All right.
so we'll save that for future episodes.
All right. Well, look, thank you to our wonderful listeners.
Yes.
I hope we haven't bored you today. And a bit of an unexpected topic today with Australian politics. Hope we haven't bored you. Hope you'll listen to our next one. We don't know what the topic is, but
we'll pick one out of the hat.
We'll pick one out of the hat.
And there's my hat just over there as well.
Wonderful. And why do you wear a hat, Llama?
Because it's the style.
Very nice.
Anyway,
very nice.
Thank you again. This is Wonder Llama and Dr. Brand Raven.
And my signing off. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
We will see you next time on our fabulous podcast known as
Bricking the Bubble.